Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cellular Healing TV. This is episode 111, and I have Dr. Pompa here, of course, and we have special guest, Dr. Dawn Clum. We have a really exciting topic for you guys today. We're going to be talking about fasting, specifically water fasting, and its connection to diabetes and insulin management and ketosis and a lot of other things. So before we get started and jump in, I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Clum. Dr. Dawn Clum, DC, graduated from Life University in Marietta, Georgia in 1997 with a degree in human nutrition. He then attended Life Chiropractic College West and graduated with his doctorate in chiropractic in 2000. After graduation, he moved to San Jose, Costa Rica, where he was invited to work with the Costa Rican Olympic Committee and athletes. He participated in the National Central American and Caribbean Central American Games as the team chiropractor for the country's most elite athletes through the Olympic Committee and as the official chiropractor for 2 professional soccer teams. Very cool. Dr. Clum was influential in bringing the gift of chiropractic care to the people of Central America and formed the first board recognizing chiropractic as a licensed and legal healing art in Costa Rica. After 8 years in Costa Rica, Dr. Clum traveled to Spain, where he practiced and did consulting for 2 years. And then he returned to the U.S. and now practices at the Abundant Health, Family, Wellness, and Chiropractic in New York, teaching patients how to achieve better health by implementing easy lifestyle changes. He puts an emphasis on the area of weight loss, particularly for those who have had repeated challenges with losing stubborn weight and belly fat and victims of yo-yo dieting. So he's currently working towards his master's degree in nutrition, and he's fully bilingual in Spanish and English and enjoys spending time with his wife and wonderful children, and is also an avid sports and exercise enthusiast and participates in many community events. So welcome to the show, Dr. Clum.
Thank you very much. You really had to for that bio.
I did.
That's an old one. I'm now in Seattle.
Hey, Don, we're getting a little feedback on your, I don't know, maybe turn down your volume or something, or put another earphone in, perhaps. So.
How's that? How we doing?
Yep.
Is that better?
Yeah, you're a little bit distant, though. You're a little, talk again?
Yeah, can you hear me? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. No echo. Just speak up, and I think we're fine. So, but
right.
Yeah, Don, I've known you for years. My gosh, my early seminar days. I remember, you sitting out there. I have so much respect for what you're doing. I mean, just amazing. You and your father. Your father was president of Life West, where you went for, 30 years? Don? 30 years he was president? Yeah. Yeah, what a guy. I mean, what a family. What a heritage, you come from. And, your dad did great things, and now you too, Don. And I was really excited to have you on the show for a few reasons, because I love the work you're doing with diabetes. You and I line up, with everything. We read a lot of the same articles, and we both love fasting and ketosis. And Don, when I saw you at the last seminar that we were both teaching at, you were somewhere around day 23, I don't know, so 20, 21, 22, 23, of a fast, which there you went 30 days on a water fast, right? So I want to start by, talking a little bit about how that experience, that was a unique experience, obviously. I mean, we had one of our other doctors on who went 22 days. And remember at the seminar, Don, I said, well, you got to beat Dempsey.
Yeah,
You got to beat Dempsey. So, anyways, you did. But I want to talk about that experience. And I want to talk a little bit more about fasting, because since we ran Dr. Dempsey's, we have several of our docs who have been doing fasts, and, obviously many of their clients. But we've gotten email after email, about fasting. So I want to hit some more of those questions. But tell us your experience, Don. 30 days, man. What was it like?
Yeah, that was the longest one I've done to date. So that was a big one. And every time I do a fast, and what ends up being a prolonged fast never plans on being a prolonged fast. I start with a 3-day fast. If a 3-day fast goes well, then I go 5 days. 5 days moves to 8, moves to the highest. I did 2 12 days last year, and this time at 12 days it was easy. When I hit the 2-week part, it took on a whole different level, and it was so easy that I just kept rolling it through. Even at 30 days, I wasn't in need, I wasn't suffering, I wasn't hungry, I wasn't going through any problems of energy or sleep or anything. I was feeling very good. I could have kept going, but at some point you got to stop, and everyone around me thought I was crazy, and when are you going to stop? And so we planned a big coming off the fast party, and we went from there.
Yeah, so you came off the fast. I'm sure you were drinking beer and drinking wine and a big fat steak. Is that how that happened?
Oh man, those thoughts go through your mind, but that's not what I've done. I've made that mistake thinking you can just come off the fast and just go crazy. And man, it only takes once or twice to do that, and you won't do that again. But no,
Absolutely.
I planned my coming off. I had a small breakfast set. I could only get through half the breakfast, and it was a small breakfast. And that day, I probably only got through half my food. The next day, pretty similar. I just started gradually coming back. And we did have a coming off the fast party because my friends knew I was doing this. And we had some people over, and we had some good nutritional stuff a few days later, not that first day.
Yeah.
I originally got into fasting because when I lived in Costa Rica, like you mentioned, for 8 years. And when I was there, we had integrative practices. And we had a couple medical doctors on my staff. And one day, the medical doctor pulled me aside. We were at a Christmas party, which is summertime there, and so we were out at the pool and this and that. He comes over to me and he says, "Hey, we need to have an appointment on Monday, you and me." And I'm like, "Oh, great, something. He's mad at me or something like that." And so we go and we have that meeting, and he tells me, he's like, "Look, on your back, you have a very big lesion. You have a problem going on there." He diagnosed it as skin cancer. Now, I never went and got it biopsied. I didn't do anything like that. I didn't go into a more formal approach, but I immediately started changing what I was doing. And I was already doing stuff pretty well. I was young at the time, and so younger at least, and started doing different kinds of fasting, rotational, juicing, stuff like that. And within 6 months, that lesion had grown bigger, came to the surface, and fell off. And about 2 years later, the same thing happened. I went to a dermatologist because I had some food poisoning and it made a rash. I want to know if it was contagious so I can go to practice or not. And she's looking at it and she says whatever she says, but she says, besides this rash, I had a mole on my neck that was doing the same thing. And so I'm like, "Oh, I know. Sometimes they freak out and this and that." She goes, "No, that's bad. That's skin cancer." Again, didn't get the biopsy, didn't do anything. Went back on to the fasting, fruit fasting and stuff like that. And with the same thing, within 6 months, it came up, it surfaced, it got ugly, and it fell off.
Yeah, actually, and I had at the last seminar, I called you up on stage, and I had you tell about your experiences, and you said this last water fast, your skin tags were falling off because I made that comment about somebody else, and the same thing happened to you, right? I mean, just these little things start falling off your skin literally. I mean, that's the beauty of fasting.
Yeah, they get all red at first, and they turn purple, and then they start to itch and they hurt, and then eventually they just dry up and fall off.
Yeah.
Are you guys? Sorry, are you having trouble hearing? I'm getting a lot of feedback and a lot of echoing.
Yeah, I hear a little echoing. I think it's coming from your computer, Dawn. Maybe put both earphones in. Try that.
All right, let's see. Sorry about that, guys.
Missy, I'm hearing the echoing of all the past conversations. It seems to be very delayed.
How's that? Is that any better?
Yes, I don't hear the echoing now.
Yeah. It was very delayed. It was like almost like it was playing another episode in the background. Remember, that's happened before. So can you hear us okay, Don?
Yeah, I can hear you. We're all good.
Great. That's better. So, this is, fasting. I mean, obviously, this is something that, you've experienced yourself. You've experienced with, obviously many clients, but you have and I want you to have a little bit of conversation about pre-diabetics and diabetics fasting, because I think there's a lot of notion that, hey, diabetics can't fast, but yet we see this happening all the time. Of course, we're talking about fasting with supervision, and this is why we're educating doctors around the country about these things. However, tell us your experience, because you deal a lot with diabetics, Don.
Yeah, well, now since we were in New York, we had an integrative practice there. We had a medical doctor, we had the chiropractic nutritionist, we had a gym with a trainer, we had a wellness psychologist, a massage therapist, and we had our own lab there for a little while, and we were doing a lot of stuff. And we got very successful, especially with diabetes, on naturally getting people through this and really deciding what does it mean to reverse diabetes, not just blood sugar levels, but reverse the condition, the pathology of diabetes. And so we got very successful on the one-on-one type of style. And I have a friend who has a wellness company which is shifting into population health, where they do corporate wellness for big companies, and they do health programs. And he's like, look, I want that kind of success with our population health program. We don't just want to do the traditional thing. We want something of our own. We want your program. And so he brought me out to Seattle, and that's where I am now. My wife has a chiropractic office that she runs, and I work in the population health world, and my specialty is advanced metabolic programs, and specifically for the last 2 years, full-time then some, I've been focusing on diabetes prevention. So identifying people in what I call pre-diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and seeing how we can reverse that. We don't go into the type 2 diabetes in the populations. One-on-one I do, but not in the populations because that's considered disease management. But we know that if they're on that road and they're going down that road with insulin resistance, it's only a matter of time until they get there. Statistically, anywhere from 5 to 10 years and so forth. And so the challenge became, I don't get to see them face to face. We use coaches, we use education, we use webinars, we teach them different styles, methods, and approaches to lifestyle to turn this around, and consequently, over time, we have a 16-week program. We were able to see a lot of benefit, and we're actually challenging the National Diabetes Prevention Program, which is the gold standard for everyone medical out there, with a completely unique, completely proprietary program. And we're going through, we went through IRB, and just before I come out to your seminar, the day before we start your seminar in Atlanta, I'll be at Life University working with their research team, working with the head of positive psychology and coaching, working with the head of sports health science, with nutrition, and so forth, to see where we can come up with some more ways to test and to get some more data to publish about this lifestyle, this way of life that we're teaching.
It's great. Yeah, no, it's great, Don. And tell us a little bit about how fasting, what you've seen with diabetes and fasting, and maybe some other experiences and things you've seen with fast on some of these people in the trials.
Yeah, a lot of people, that's a great question. A lot of people mess up something as simple as not eating, right? And so they use it for detox, they call it a cleanse, they call it a fast. There's really a lot of ways to go about it, but what we teach people, the first thing is you need to have your context. You need to have, why are you doing this? And where is it placed within the bigger vision of what you want for yourself and your health? Because these are not one-off things. You don't just kind of read about it and do it and hope that you're going to get whatever you saw. You want to work with a professional. You want to go through the right process. You want to have a pre-program. Yeah. You want to we launch people into rotational concepts where they might go into a pseudo-fasting where they just lower calories, or an intermittent fasting, or a fasting mimicking diet, or a ketogenic model, and then go into an alternate day concept, and then go into a straight, what you call block type of fast, or a water fast 3 days, then maybe a couple weeks later 5 days, and then 7 days, and then bring them back all the way back. But the key then at the end is where are you going to go from there? You just set yourself up metabolically for some great success. What now? If you just go back to the way you were, why even do it? And so we help launch that for the rest of a year or longer, whatever they're into.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And, how do people think, gosh, diabetics or even someone pre-diabetes, how do they fast? But yet we've had these amazing experiences where their blood sugars start to normalize. So, talk about that a little bit.
Well, the key with this is how we look at this. We look at insulin resistance. That's the driver of metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, diabetes, and then cardiometabolic, heart disease, and so on. But the fundamental problem is insulin resistance. And if you start to look at it through a hormonal view, through the hormonal lens versus a caloric, versus a blood sugar model, the whole atmosphere, the whole terrain changes dramatically. Things that are okay for a quote-unquote diabetic, according to blood sugar rules, are not okay for them according to insulin rules, and it's the insulin that drives the problem, not the blood sugar. Blood sugar is an artifact. It's almost irrelevant in a lot of people if you're focusing on the insulin. So now they come in, they got their blood sugars up and down, they're worried, they're monitoring, that's fine. There's no risk at fasting then. For type 2 diabetes, we're not talking type 1, obviously, we're talking type 2, pre-diabetes, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance. They respond very well because when you're focused on the hormonal side, diabetes, pre-diabetes, metabolic syndrome, first and foremost, before it's anything else, it's a liver problem. It's a liver problem. And so we are looking at it from that point of view. By the time it gets to the pancreas and you see pancreatic dysfunction and you get pancreatic damage, that is way down the line. You can identify this 10 years, 15 years, 20 years earlier if you start to look at the metabolism, the behavior of the liver first and foremost.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that, because people are going, well, wait a minute, I thought my problem was a pancreas problem, or producing insulin or a glucose problem. You're saying it's a liver problem.
Yeah.
Explain that further, Don.
Yeah, well, we can start back to the pancreas. We can lead it back to the pancreas. We know about insulin. Insulin comes from the beta cells within the islets within the pancreas. Most people, or at least practitioners, get that. But that's a beta cell. The beta cell is acting on the alpha cell. Where there's a beta, there's an alpha, and vice versa. The alpha cell is the glucagon-producing cells. And so what the first and foremost insulin does is it turns off glucagon, because glucagon goes through the system, gets to the liver, and it shuts off the production or the release of blood sugar into the blood. The liver controls your blood sugar, 100%. The blood sugar that's in your blood right now and even after the meal is not from that meal. It's from your liver, and it could be from yesterday or the day before, depending on your metabolic state. Because think about it, in our whole body, we only have 5 grams of blood sugar when we have a normal range of blood sugar. 5 grams is less than a packet. And the difference between normal and type 2 diabetes is 1 gram extra of sugar. So if someone eats a meal of 50, 75, 100 grams of sugar, that's not blasting through their system. That goes through their intestines, into their liver, and the liver has to deal with that and make sure it's releasing. So what glucagon does is it makes it release it into the blood. Insulin turns that off. And so when we see the blood sugar go down because of insulin, it's not because it's pushing it into cells. It's because it's not releasing anymore from the liver.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think during these fasts, when we do these periodic fasts, whether it's daily, just fasting 24 hours periodically, right? Intermittent fasting, pushing out before you eat, 18, 20 hours a meal, or a block fast, and periodically doing this type of restriction. Even ketosis is a type of restriction. Don, what we see is that change in the liver, don't we?
Yes.
All of a sudden it's like, all of those things have a profound effect on the liver. Many of these, I always call them the skinny diabetic. They have fatty livers. The problem is in fact the liver, and yet, these types of things that we're discussing here have such a dramatic effect, on the liver. And there's so many aspects to how the liver affects your health. From particle, cholesterol, glucose, insulin. Go ahead.
Yeah, the liver has to change first. The liver is the metabolic director of this whole thing, and what happens is when this sugar is being bombarded through the liver, it's putting it into glycogen, but it still can't release the extra. When the glycogen's full, more sugar keeps coming in. It's got to go somewhere. We make triglycerides, and we put it in the liver. That's when we get fatty liver.
Absolutely.
The nephrology journal I read about 3 months ago from Jason Fung, that sent me, they say that in 10 years, the #1 disease globally, around the world, is going to be non-alcoholic fatty liver because of this. Everyone's going down that road, and so the liver gets fat, and that's the dangerous fat. That's the beginning of visceral fat. As it spills out of the liver, that's how it gets to the pancreas. You get pancreatic fat and other visceral fats. Visceral fat's not the same fat as adipose. So when you do something like a fast, when you go low insulin or ketogenic or a combination thereof, that visceral fat burns off first. It burns off twice as fast as your body fat, because the body fat's not really dangerous, but that visceral fat is, and the body won't lose the body fat until the liver fat and visceral fat is down. That's why some people can do all the right things for a long time and not lose weight, but suddenly kick off.
And by the way, I want to point out that a lot of skinny people have this visceral fat, too much visceral fat, too much liver fat, fatty liver, and those are our skinny, unhealthy people, right? So, and those people are thinking, well, I can't fast because I don't have enough muscle. Oh no, you've got plenty of visceral fat, toxic visceral fat, because by the way, the visceral fat's what holds the toxins most often. You have a fatty liver, and your body will not go after that needed tissue like the muscle. It will go after that visceral fat, that fatty liver first. It's that intelligent. Or even tumors, as we've discussed on other shows, all these other tissues that are bad tissue. The body's so intelligent that it literally will start to utilize those tissues as energy first, which is absolutely remarkable, Don. And on your fast, man, how much weight did you lose? 30 days,
I lost 23 pounds, and I can tell you I was working out, full workout, so heavy lifting, intensity training, and cardio for the first week. Then I dropped the heavy lifting. Then I dropped everything after the second week. And as it was at the second week, from the second week going into third and fourth, is when my body composition really shifted. We saw it in my face. My waist went down dramatically. Things shifted around. So that's really when something extra kicked in. And so yeah, I lost a bunch of weight. I did the scans. We did the in-body 3-frequency biometric scans, and I lost fat. I lost a lot of water. And that's another thing. People think that, oh, it's just water weight. Yeah, that's very important. Extra water, extra fluid, extra gook floating around there is just mediating bad stuff and inflammation, and you don't want that in there. So even if all I lost was water weight, which it wasn't, that would still be a move in the right direction. And I always tell people, when you're doing the right stuff, like we direct people in our programs out there, it's always working. Whether it works on what you want it to work on or not, that's questionable, but it's always working. And if you hold, I told you the story of the patient who came to me and she had a CT scan. Her liver was 2.5 times that of normal. That's a medical emergency, but she didn't want to go that route. So we worked together, and because it was so big and so jammed and so dysfunctional, it took 5.5 months before she would even get into ketosis. And we're doing fasting, we're doing ketosis, we're doing everything you can imagine. But once it did, from that point on, man, the weight just started coming off, and at 9 months when we rescanned the liver, it was normal.
Yeah, Don, it's so true. Some people just can't. Why am I not getting into ketosis? Why am I not getting ketosis? Okay, these are terrible malfunctioning mitochondria, liver, and it's a sign that something is very wrong. But the good news is the genes, the genetics start to change. The mitochondria, the bad ones that can't adapt, start to die off. The body starts to shift, and eventually it happens, Don. And we even do something, diet variation, where we move people in and out of these different phases. And you and I are both believers in, periodic restriction times, whether it's ketosis, whether it's fasting, intermittent fasting. And we always say that every fast, health happens to another level, right? I mean, you've experienced that, I'm sure, even in yourself, and I'm sure you've experienced it with patients.
Well, even with going to 3 meals a day, before this call, I was in the office and I had a call with a client for a state. The entire state is our client and their employees, and I'm dealing with the HR people. I'm dealing with their team of dietitians and 2 of their RNs as their lifestyle advisory board, and they're arguing with why we tell people to eat 3 meals a day and not snack. And so just on that topic alone, I had a 32-slide PowerPoint with 26 studies and probably 25 different quotes from the old American Dietetics Association. They changed their name, just showing that none of this is conflicting, that the information is out there, and that when you're looking from a hormonal point of view, you can't do the same old things. The 5 to 7 meals a day is killing people out there.
Absolutely.
And so the first step is just eat 3 meals a day. You don't even have to change what you're eating. Mrs. Jones, if you don't want to do all just eat the junk, but just make it breakfast, lunch, and dinner, nothing in between. And when you start feeling better, promise me you'll ask me for more. And they do.
Absolutely. Dr. Don, you and I agree on that. That's the first thing that I have to do with some people. I don't just move them directly into intermittent fasting where they can go 20 hours, because most people can't. If they go 20 hours without food, they're angry, they're irritable, they're moody, they have no energy, their brain doesn't work, right? We do the same thing. We say, look, no food, no snacks between meals, go to 3 meals a day. And it's remarkable how hard that is for people. But Don, you're exactly right. The old adage, eat 5-6 meals a day, it's killing people. Every study shows you want to live longer, eat less. And more specifically, eat less often.
Less frequency. It's not always the amount, it's the frequency. And when they shift over there, once they're doing 3 meals a day and they go, oh, this is easier than I thought.
Then you can skip a meal.
Exactly. All those weird reactions that they get, the dizziness, that they realize those are detox reactions, not low blood sugar. And then they get stable. Then you say, okay, now Tuesday and Thursday, skip breakfast. And then the next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, skip breakfast. Simple. And then they do an alternate day. And then if they never move beyond that, then we get to move to whole foods, add more fat, cut the carbs. Because if you're building like that, when you do it that way, you start with the brain chemistry, with the carb addiction cycle, right? And you work on the body chemistry with the serotonin addiction cycle of the pancreas, which is a whole nother talk potentially, and then you hit both of those, then the hormones follow, and it's the hormones that drive metabolism. Every other program is trying to manipulate metabolism with calories and reduction versus elimination, and it doesn't work. It makes people worse. You have to eliminate some things, and that might even be a snack or a meal, not just a type of food.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, we get into the debates, right? It's like, turn on the television, they're going to talk about another low-fat, low-calorie diet, right? How many calories does this have? Look, nobody can be successful pushing food away saying, I'm going to eat less. It doesn't work that way.
It's miserable.
You have to eat less often to live longer. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Don, you and I have less calories than the average person, right? But never do we not eat till full. We eat till full every meal, and sometimes I eat beyond the full. But the point is, at the end of the day, I eat less.
We talked about it as well. There's also advantages. Everyone's a little bit different. There's also the metabolic profile, people who eat breakfast and a late lunch and no dinner. And so sometimes it takes working with someone to know what their biorhythm is going to be. And that's we like to track as much as we can, blood sugar and their weight. And people don't like to track their weight every day. But look, that's how you learn your biorhythms. You figure out what metabolically is better for you, because any step in that direction is better than nothing. The next step comes down to what I think is one of the biggest metabolic secrets out there, is what we call glycogen flexibility. And that comes from physical activity. So first we tell people, change what you eat, change when you eat, then you change how you move, because now they're considering declaring skeletal muscle as endocrine tissue. They want to make it an endocrine organ because it generates hormones, just like they did with the heart in 1987, saying it's an endocrine organ more than anything because of the hormones and neurotransmitters and influence it has on the body. They're looking at skeletal muscle the same way. Right. And glycogen flexibility is huge because of the mitochondria. You can up your number of mitochondria. You can make them more efficient. That's your engine. You get a more efficient, bigger engine. And then the glycogen, your ability to store that energy, that can shift from a sedentary person to someone who trains regularly 2,000%. And then from someone who trains regularly, just exercise, to a competitive athlete, another 2,000%. So that's a 4,000% shift in their gas tank. Yeah. So most people out there have small little engines, inefficient engines, and they have tiny little gas tanks. And so that blood sugar that should be going in and out there is spilling over into their blood and hitting the next phase down the line. So exercise becomes
so let's talk about that. Actually, you know one of my best friends, Tom Eisman, Dr.
Yes,
Tom.
Sir.
Strongest guys in the world. Am I right on that?
Yeah, one, if not the strongest body weight to lift ability ever recorded.
I remember once he hadn't power lifted in years, and we were in chiropractic school together, and he decided to do an all-natural powerlifting competition, and we were there in the show, and he decides he's going to open with 500 something, and Tom weighed 165 pounds, right? And so they're thinking, this nutcase, like, he's opening with 550? And he just yanks it right up. Tom didn't even make a noise, right? So, of course, after that, all these people came and said, how much does this guy do? And I said, I don't know. I mean, Tom ended up winning the whole lift at like 667 or something. And then they found out it's Tom Eisman, who holds, 800-pound world record deadlift. Anyway, so that's another subject for another day. We both love Tom. But talk a little bit about that, though. I mean, there's benefits. I always say, hey, look, high-intensity exercise is better for weight loss. However, there's great benefits to endurance, and even a combination is great for people. I do both. I love both. But talk to a little bit, how many days a week? But what if they don't have enough energy? And, give some recommendations on exercise.
Well, there's really 4 different genres, so to speak, of exercise. We have weightlifting, we have traditional cardio, we have intensity training, and then we have what we call stress relief cardio. And so they all show benefit, but there's some studies out there that show the combination of these things work better than any one of them apart, by far. And you can track the A1C blood levels, you can track the insulin, you can track the benefit. So just like with the rotational fasting or eating styles, we use what's called a variable output exercise program, the VOE. Variable, because in the worlds I travel, if you say high intensity interval training, you'll get thrown out. That's a bad word. Just like you don't say
high fat. Fasting work in those areas?
No, that's an alternate day eating plan. That's a rotational meal timing. We have to tread around that very carefully. So the variable output exercises, how do you incorporate it? You might only need 1 or 2 days of weights, or you might and then you might have 1 or 2 days of cardio. You might not even get into intensity for a while, and then we tell people to come back to the stress relief cardio. That's like, go take a walk, go on a treadmill if that's your thing, and go for a while.
Sometimes that's all they can do. They don't even
that doesn't count as your exercise. That's not exercise. That's stress relief cardio. You're changing things. You don't put the headphones on. You don't put sunglasses on. You don't have your hands in your pocket. You go and you get that cross crawl pattern. What that does is it turns off the conscious sympathetic side of the nervous system and goes into the parasympathetic automatic intrinsic nervous system in the muscles, and then your brain will light up and your creativity centers, your regeneration centers light up because they're not focused on thinking about what you have to do because they know how to walk. That's why when people do it, and after 20 minutes of a steady pace, when they stop, they feel their muscles go tick, 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 almost like a car when you turn off the engine and it's still clicking through. That's what you're doing. You've just activated the intrinsic muscles, and that's why a lot of creativity. Einstein says he came up with this theory of relativity while he's riding his bike, and all these people, they come up with ideas while they're physically active. Think of it when you're on a tough phone call. What do? I put my headset on and I start walking around.
Yeah.
You got to create those things. It's just an easier thing. And so by creating some kind of pattern, do something every day. And you can even, at this rate, you can do 2 times a day. Just spread them out. Now you got 4 options. You can lift some weights and try to go as heavy as you can with being safe. You can go traditional cardio. We all know what that is, the old-fashioned cardio. You can do the stress relief cardio by taking a walk here and there, maybe on a break, maybe before or after a meal or something like that. And then you have the variable output exercise, or the high intensity training, which they can look into, and they mix up a little bit of cardio with the weights. And then now you have a great menu of options, and they all do a little bit something different to improve that glycogen flexibility and enhance your metabolic performance in your body.
We interviewed Ben Greenfield on the show, and he did the interview on a treadmill. So this guy, he's a triathlete. He's a fat-adapted triathlete, right? So he's, in ketosis, and he's so active that I'm sure he can do 100 grams of carbs a day and still be in ketosis because he eats like tons of vegetables, and it still doesn't throw him out of ketosis. But he exercises all day. He runs to get the mail. He does push-ups. He runs down. He does sprints, does push-ups. I mean, this guy is active all day, so he does meetings. He's on his treadmill, so he doesn't sit much, But so it's always possible. But I agree, Don. That variation, just is great. Some people have to start with something so simple until they have enough cellular energy. Even to do, some of the other types of exercise. But resistive training, boy, I tell you what, it's huge, for really getting the cells to hear the hormones and really what it does for hormone sensitivity. And resistive training is underappreciated in the diabetic world. We both agree on that.
Well, we talk about that from a neurological standpoint. We talk about that as the neurological tone. Practitioners out there, they know the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic, and you hear a lot about sympathetic dominance. I'm not a big fan of that idea because the sympathetics don't really get overly revved when you look at it and they actually test. What happens is the parasympathetics get weakened. And so we talk about the sympathetics being the gas, the parasympathetics being the brake. You need both of those to navigate your car down the street. You need both of those to navigate your body through life. And so even if you're not slamming on the gas, going 100 miles per hour, even if you're going 20 miles per hour down the street, but if your brakes don't work, you're going to crash. And you might end up crashing 10, 15 times a day, and that's what we see. And so it gets labeled as sympathetic dominance when it's really a parasympathetic weakness. And with diabetics, that's fundamentally, that's really, really strong. And what a lot of practitioners, I think, misinterpret is on the side of parasympathetics, there's two subsides in there. There's growth and there's repair. You touched on it earlier. Growth is something that you want when you're a child growing or when you're a pregnant mama building a baby. That's really it. Everything else that we think is growth, like muscles and getting stronger and flexible, that's really repair. And so there's this different hormone set, like insulin and so forth, for growth, and there's a different hormone set for repair, which is more like human growth hormone, and they oppose each other. There's not one thing. You don't get both. You get one or the other. So a lot of these people are eating pre-workouts, post-workouts, workouts during the thing, doing all these different things, trying to get big and strong, and they think they're growing, and they are. They're in growth, but what they really want is repair, and they're down-regulating it. And the problem is you stay in growth, growth happens, whether it's body fat or it's extra tissue or tumors, and you just don't want that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, there's a lot of debate out there whether you eat before you work out, whether you eat after you work out, how much time do you give it after workouts? I'm a firm believer in exercising on an empty stomach because of the growth hormone rise, and I read study after study. That's what I do because of the studies that I read. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, and I've heard you speak about it well. That's exactly right. People mistaken the concept of working out while fasting. It doesn't mean like I was on 2-week fast, you're trying to do a triathlon. It just means don't eat before you work out. It can be either wake up and work out before breakfast or wait 4 hours after your last meal to work out. That metabolic profile is what we're looking for. If you set up with sugar and insulin, whether it's from a whey protein, sugar modified milkshake pre-workout, or what have you, or a meal, you're gonna affect your workout. You're not gonna have the energy. You're not gonna have the stamina. You're not gonna get the hormonal response. And if you do, And then you end your workout and you have the traditional post-workout shake. You're going to hit the insulin. You're going to turn off the growth hormone. You're going to set it up. We talk about it all the time. What we do during the day, through the way we eat, the way we think, how we move our body and exercise and everything else, sets a stage for a grand theatrical presentation at night when we sleep hormonally. So we're doing all these little things. We're not growing. We're not doing anything during the day. We're just setting up the stage. And so therefore, when you sleep, everyone comes out and play, and they create this symphonic inner coordination. There's this grand presentation in your body. It repairs, it detoxes, builds muscle, burns fat. That's when it happens. But
Right.
if you're cutting off your own nose to spite your face by eating the wrong thing post-workout, or treating yourself for a Dairy Queen after doing so well, or not watching it, or not sleeping, that's a big one. If you're not sleeping, you're not getting that benefit. You're it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, so how long do you like to eat after a workout, and talk about a good meal post-workout?
Yeah, as long as I can go after a workout is normally, because I work out about 5 a.m. And I do my thing, and then I'll probably won't eat generally until about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. In the beginning, it gets a little bit weird, but a lot of that comes down to water. And when you do eat, make sure you're using whole sea salt to get you all those natural electrolytes. Now, I'm not talking Gatorade or anything like that. I'm talking those because because that's what I noticed when I was fasting too. If I didn't supplement with those natural salts, I had problems.
That's
I
right.
got cramps. I got weird stuff I didn't think I was going to get, to be honest, but I did. And as soon as I either took the salt directly until it started giving me sores, I would put on a little piece of fat or something like that, like a piece of an avocado or a teaspoon of coconut oil every day. Then suddenly the detox reaction, the cold, really, really super cold that some people get, that I got when I was prolonged fasting, went away.
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted you to talk about that too, because the salt, the electrolytes are the magic, and you need the salt. Like you said, hey, if I didn't do the salt, I would get really cold. I mean, being cold is part of fasting, right? I mean, your body is, it's resting. I mean, its metabolic engine's not revved up, right? So of course your body temperature goes down a little bit. But what a difference when you take in the salt, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you said that, and you carried your little salts. And when I saw you, right, I was like, that's right, that's what I want.
Yeah,
That's
I have them right
my
there on the shelf. I take them everywhere. I have 3 different kinds of sea salts from around the world, just to give some variety. But we found that with other people fasting too. There's one thing to get a little bit cold, but what I think most people experience, especially in the beginning of a fast or the first time they do it, they're not getting cold because we've tested their temperature. Their core temperature is not going down. What's happening is they're so used to burning hot by being a sugar burner, chronic sugar burner, having those toxins. They're running red all the time that when they shift to normal, they feel cold. It's like when you're cold and you go to step in a hot tub and it feels like your toes are burning. Your toes aren't burning, but it feels that way because of the contrast, and I think that's what a lot of people feel. But once you move past that stage in a prolonged fast, you can get that deep, and I haven't noticed much core temperature change, but it feels like it's like a jacket doesn't help. It's not about putting gloves on. You just have this deep sensation of cold that the electrolytes, which help obviously with thermal regulation, or at least sensation of it, change a lot.
Yeah, no, it does. It really, the sea salt and the electrolytes are really key. And it's important. That's, I think, one of the most important aspects, and of course how you break the fast. What did you eat day 1 and day 2 after you broke the fast?
Well, day 1, I had put it on Facebook because everyone wants to know that. They think I'm going to go get a jumbo burger or something like that. No, I got a salad dish, and I had about a cup of homemade coleslaw with a homemade mayo that we make. I had 2 eggs, and I had we do microgreens. We have a closet garden, we call it, with the kids, and I had a bunch of microgreens and a little bit of homemade kimchi. So I want, part of my post-fast concept is not just to go back. I want to reconstitute. Now, just a little tag here, a 28-day fast, I told you I'm not going to do it again, but this is interesting. A 28-day fast is enough to genetically alter your gut bacteria to a new species.
That's right.
Wow.
2,000 generations is what it takes for any genetic lineage to change as a species, to really change, not just epigenetics, but change the fundamentals. And since bacteria only live 20 minutes, that equates to about 28 days. And so by the 30th day, I knew I got an opportunity here to replant, repopulate, and really influence that gut bacteria. And so I went heavy. Not heavy, but I had a little bit of fermented foods, and I had rotational. I had all sorts of fermented foods that were prepared for this that I took in so that we could feed the good guys and just hopefully let the bad guys stay away and just reconstitute. So that's what I'm saying. The post-fast, that was my thing. I needed to rebuild my gut, and I did it little by little. And so that was the first meal. I only ate half of it. I really couldn't do volume because your hunger's not there. You're just not hungry. So you're like, oh, it looks good. I took a picture, put it on Facebook like everyone else, but couldn't get through it. So I saved it, and I had it maybe around 2, and then just worked from there. And then that's a lot of vinegar stuff, lot fermented stuff when canned, pickled that we did, and then just high fat, meat, moderate protein.
And people try to eat a lot of raw. Sometimes they get a little bogged down. So just some soft cooked vegetables are easier to digest. A little bit some berries and things. Just there's simple foods, but the ferments are key, man. We call it reinoculation. Where we want to reinoculate the good bacteria because you starve down all bacteria, and you're right. That's your opportunity to bring in these good guys that couldn't exist before. You take all the darn bacteria and eating the fermented foods, and you're still not populating your gut, because there's too much bad. But when you starve it all down, boy, this is your opportunity to reinoculate. So, Don, you did it right, Dr. Don. You did it right. So.
Well, it made sense to me, and we're actually taking things to another level in the research that I'm doing on the side as we do the diabetes prevention program, because I this whole thing about insulin resistance and how it drives all degenerative disease and heart disease, cancers, dementias, you name it, is so profound to me. And I always wonder, how come it's so easy to raise our blood sugar? You can do it by a thought, by food, by activity, by whatever you want, but it's so hard to lower it. And the key is, evolutionarily speaking, we never had to lower it. You absolutely never had to lower it because we didn't have that contact. And so I'm looking at diabetes, I'm looking at the damage to the pancreas, and like, why is it so profound? It really can happen so fast. And we know about the carbs, we know about insulin, but I think the other side of it comes down to cooked food. That we haven't been cooking food all that long, definitely not the 40,000 years that it would take to genetically change our structure to adapt to it. And so what happens is when you cook food, it ruptures the cells, or overcook, not lightly cook, as you said, but most people cook, fry, or whatever. And so it gets to your belly, and there's no more enzymes in there. They're dead. Your stomach acid would normally have killed the enzymes, but they dissolve from the inside out and they release the nutrients. So when you've cooked them, you've ruptured them, now it's in your belly, no enzymes, so your body has to put enzymes in there to get them out of your gut, and that comes from the pancreas. So here's the pancreas just shooting out insulin because of the junk we're eating, and now here it is, everything we eat is shooting out pancreatic enzymes in there, and so it's getting hit on both ends here, and we're just wearing that thing out. And so one of the recommendations we're going to move to is not only do we want you to do 3 meals a day, whole foods versus processed foods, and now we want as much as you can, eat as much of that as you can raw. And that's going to be the next step, I think, because we're trying to take that pancreatic load of the enzymes off of it.
It's true. People don't eat that anymore. Yeah, what I'm referencing is just right after a fast. I've had people just eat a salad and they can't digest it, right? It's like just,
oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Right after a fast, oftentimes just lightly cooked, it helps it break it down because they don't have the enzymes. That's the point, right? They can't break it down, so we need to break some of it down with the process of cooking just for a day or two. And then it seems like even the next day they can start eating some of the raw stuff again without some cramping going on. But start slow, folks. Start slow and low. And
it even happened to me. I had some digestive distress going through it. Some of those foods, some of the vegetables actually release more nutrients when you lightly cook them, especially the ones that we've bred, not genetically modified. But
of course, some things are better cooked. Yeah.
That like broccolis and the more sturdy, bigger, that when you look at an indigenous species versus what we have now, they're completely different. Those seem to need a little bit of pop to them.
Yeah, no doubt. Some things are more break, like I said, give off more nutrients cooked. No doubt. Some don't. But I think still you're right, though. I mean, people hardly eat, vegetables, any raw foods anymore, really. And we overcook everything. And of course, frying and all that stuff, that's a whole nother subject. I mean, that's it's a whole nother level of, cooking. But, I couldn't agree more, and that's great thoughts. But, I mean, ketosis. I mean, let's just quickly talk a little bit about ketosis because it's another ancient healing strategy that we love. We love these restricted fasts and intermittent fasting, and both of us believe these are the keys to change the epigenome. These are the keys to really that deep healing that we need for the epidemic of diseases that we're seeing today. Ketosis is one of them. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, ketosis. That that's a fascinating thing, and people have a lot of trouble with it. And genetically, we're a little bit different, and we handle things differently. But what people don't realize is, one, you're not in ketosis 24/7. Even if you don't eat, your body still makes some sugar, anywhere from 80 grams to, some say, up to 200 grams of sugar. The body has no problem making sugar. Gluconeogenesis from glycerol, from breaking down fat, from ketones, from lactic acid from working out, and from fragmented muscle that gets broken down when we work out. It's not that the body takes it from healthy muscle to make sugar. When we move and we break down fibers, those fragments get made into sugar. So that's a misconception we hear. I had an argument with someone today about. And so we can make it very easily. And so we're never in a state of constant ketosis. So it goes in and out, and you can test it, and that's pretty cool. That's part of the biorhythm. But what people don't realize is that insulin is the fundamental determinant of whether you can be in ketosis or not. Because insulin, not only does it go in and turn off the blood sugar and all this, but when it gets to a cell that's not insulin dependent, such as not a GLUT4 carrier, so not muscle, not fat, basically, and so all the other 80% of our cells, it gets into the cell, it gets into the mitochondria, it goes to the Krebs cycle, and it physically blocks fat from entering the Krebs cycle to produce energy. So if you want to be a fat burner, which will eventually lead to being a ketone producer, even a rotational ketone producer, you got to stay away from that insulin, because as soon as that comes on board, it shuts that right off on intermitochondrial Krebs cycle level.
Yep, bam. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, no doubt. And I've seen people, it just takes them a while. They literally turn on the gene for gluconeogenesis, and they'll get sugar from anywhere but fat. Until that genome changes, but they'll literally their body will genetically become so clever at gluconeogenesis, whether it's, breaking this tissue down, protein, their muscle, whatever it takes, it will not want to burn fat. And eventually it changes, eventually through these things that we're talking about, these ancient healing strategies, the body will shift over and make that change. But it takes time for broken people.
It's like a muscle for anybody. If you're not used to it and you've been a 40-year sugar burner, like you've been teaching for years, you try to shift over, it's hard. It's like going to the gym and trying to run 10 miles if you've never done it. It's going to be hard. You're going to feel things, it's going to be wonky, you're going to need to recover, and then the next time you do it, it'll be still hard, but eventually get easier. And the benefits, the other thing is the ketones. Everyone argues about the brain and blood sugar, and yet there's some really great literature out there that shows when the brain has an injury, when we have a traumatic injury, it doesn't have to be concussion, it could be subconcussion level, we bump our head, the brain automatically switches over to using ketones. And so I go, wow, that's not a malfunction. So when the brain feels vulnerable, when the brain is suspect to problems, when the brain needs to lock things down and get things done, it goes to ketones automatically, even if there's sugar in the system. That tells me a lot right there, right? And so why if that's the ideal metabolic pathway in the signs of distress, I'd want to do it during health as well.
Yeah, my daughter hit her head she had her second concussion, and she was in Europe, and I said, you're going to have to fast, honey, 4 days, at least, and because the second one was worse, right? I mean, all the symptoms back, she couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate, so she went 4 days. Day 2, I got emails, I can't do it. I said, it's worse. I said, you'll be fine. Day 3, okay, I'm a little better. Day 4, oh my gosh, and she fixed it. Ketones heal the brain, no doubt. Like you said, it'll turn on the ketones, man, just to fix itself. I mean, isn't it remarkable? The innate intelligence. And I'll tell you, Don. From intermittent fasting daily, right now I'm not in ketosis. I will be going in probably in a month because I move in and out of the state. However, I intermittent fast. So if I measured my ketones in blood sugar this morning, let's say I'd be 80 on blood sugar. Maybe 70s, and let's say I'm 0.2, 0.3 on ketones. By 3 or 4 when I eat this afternoon, my ketones will be 0.6, 0.7, even though I'm not in ketosis. I'm not, I'm eating healthy. Of course, I'm still a healing diet, but I go into ketosis just because it rises as I'm intermittent fasting, and of course my blood sugar this afternoon will be low 70s, if not high 60s. So
that's great. That's good to know. You want to know that. It took me a long time to realize that I'm very insulin reactive. Genetically, whatever you want to say, I can fight it all I want, but I've been metabolic syndrome before. I can gain and lose weight easy, and it's frustrating as a natural person working and teaching in this thing, but I had to come to the grips. genetically very insulin reactive, and so I gotta watch those things. So those biorhythms help me a lot, because if I can look okay, but I can go off the path if I'm not careful, due to stress or inactivity. If I don't I go into spurts with my working out or how I'm eating and so forth. So I got to hold a tighter line than most people, even than some of my clients. It's just the way it is.
Yeah,
and so
I have to hold a tighter line too. I mean, I get fat easy. If I do a carb day a week, but if I eat a lot of grain, I get fat. I mean, it's genetically, it's just, and I get fat around my waist. I get the visceral fat. I get the worst fat. I mean, I get that, the fat, the visceral fat in between the organs. I mean, that's where I started putting it on first, and then of course I had high blood pressure and elevated glucose, and I wasn't obese.
Yeah.
So no doubt I get fatty liver. I get bad visceral fat. So.
It's easy to pull that energy back and forth. So that might have something to do with why it goes to the visceral sometimes first, or it depends on what we're eating, especially if it's grains or things like that. But we know, speaking of visceral fat, we know exactly how much a metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetic, exactly how much weight they have to lose off their body to become non-metabolic or non-type 2 diabetes. We know, and everyone goes, well, it depends on how much they start at. I said, no, it doesn't. They go, well, it's a percentage. I said, no, it's not. It's a finite number. And it's the same for everyone, whether they're 200 pounds or 350 pounds. And they go, what the heck are you talking about? I said, it's 1 gram. It's 1 gram of fat has to come off that body. When it does, you're no longer diabetic or metabolic syndrome, but it has to come out of your pancreas.
Yeah.
That gram has to come out of your pancreas. If it's coming anywhere else, it does not matter. That's why someone can be overweight and not have metabolic issues. Or they can be skinny and have metabolic issues because they're not going to notice 1 gram. But if it's in there and that 70-gram organ is not very big, then that's creating a dysfunction. And eventually,
and by the way, that's why these restricted moments that we move people in and out of is so important, because that's really the only thing that's going to touch that, Don. You understand?
That's it.
That's the only thing that's going to touch that. What's in the pancreas, what's in the liver. That's it.
You can't exercise it out. You can't.
Listen, I'm a firm believer that our ancestors, look, when you look at the Hunza people, I always say it's not what they're eating that makes them live so long without diseases. In other tribes in Tibetan places as well, it's the fact that they vary their diet. In the summer, they're eating mostly vegetables. I mean, they're practically vegetarians. In the winter, they're into ketosis. In the spring, they have what they call starvation spring, where they're forced into times of restriction. In the past, our ancestors always had times of restriction for whatever reason. But today we don't get that. We're never going into these times of restriction where we're really causing our body to have to, adapt and therefore eat these bad tissues, eat the bad cells. The bad cells don't adapt. Therefore we're creating healthier mitochondria. We don't do that today. So even if you're eating a perfect diet and doing all these things, you are missing it if you're not going through these diet variations in these times of restriction. And I believe that's what fixes the pancreas, and that's what fixes the liver.
Well, I think when you know it at the level that you're speaking to and that we're learning along the way, is that it becomes an ethical, if not a moral issue, to recommend certain things. Like I had that conversation with that state today. They wanted information on 3 meals a day. They wanted us to create a program that bridges the insurance carrier low fat, low cal concept with our concept. And I said, I won't do it. I said, I cannot do a program that I know and that research has shown to be a net negative in the long run for any weight loss today, because it's to me it's unethical, it's immoral. I would be, I couldn't do it. And so, but a lot of these people, if they don't hear this, they're going down that road. And we want to talk about the genetic replication that we said for changing a genome. We're doing that right now. Epigenetically and eventually hard-lining this genetic. We're making the species weaker if we don't step it up and hold a higher standard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to point out one thing you said. It's toxicity plays a major role in, you said, hey, diabetes is a liver problem. Boy, I couldn't agree more. And how much toxin is affecting that and the pancreas. When we're looking at studies showing type 2 diabetes, they said is estimated 30% of it's toxin related. I believe it's even higher than that. Who knows where it is when you look at the epigenomes, maybe it's 80%. But toxicity is key to everything we're talking about. And a multi-therapeutic approach that I teach, hold on one second. That phone never goes off, and then it does when I don't need it to. But a multi-therapeutic approach, we're dealing with cellular detox. It's huge. Doing it right, not doing just these little cleanses downstream, but up to the stream to the cell and even the brain. You put that with these ancient healing strategies, varying the diet, intermittent fasting daily, block fasting. I mean, everything that we're talking about, Don, it's like I take my hat off to you, because you're a practitioner who's doing this stuff that we know really works. And you know what? We're trying to train more people like us, Don. I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah.
We're going to be at my seminar in Atlanta. We have 200 approximately new docs there, that we're teaching this stuff to, and we need to grow as a
I've
community.
been putting it out there. That's when I got into this into a much higher level when I was outside the country for 10 years, and I came back in and I saw whoa, everything had changed. Sickness, fat kids, the whole thing was going off, and that's when I really got into it. My first introduction was some of those intensive days with you and Jack Tips in New Jersey and in New York, and from that first day that I saw you both did a version of the cell talk, right, with the cell and the hormones and from that day, I merged it, put my own stuff in there, and that became the basis of every talk we did, whether it was for chiropractic, whether it was for nutrition, whether it was for wellness. I taught the medical doctor I was working with to use this because this is the fundamental essence, and it covered it so well. And so, I give you total credit and kudos for that and opening that up, and that can be that has to be the basis of everything, And so we use that all the time, every single day with it's in all of our stuff that we use as an analogy to help people understand that this is where it comes from, and everything else that they're seeing is really an effect. And if you fix this, things take care of themselves. And that I'm glad because the body's smarter than us.
No doubt about it. Yeah, Dr. Don, we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for sharing. And hey, Meredith finished her a 4-day fast, right, Meredith? You went 4 days on just water just a week ago.
I did. It was my first water fast. I had done a few broth fasts and a whey water fast, but the water was always kind of intimidating to me. But you, Dr. Clum, at the event, and Dr. Dempsey definitely inspired me, and I did my first 4-day water fast, and I'm definitely going to do another longer water fast soon when the timing's right. I think maybe in the next few weeks, but I'm excited to do it again.
Yeah, Meredith, I have to ask you this because I just had a client tell me, who's done, whey water fasting, broth fasting, and this client said, you know what, water fasting was so much easier for them. How did you feel about that? Was water fasting easier than broth fasting and whey water fasting? The same? What was your experience?
It was actually easier after the first day. I think, like anything, it's all mental. When you're busy and finding things to do, and you're kind of staying focused on your goals, then yeah, I actually thought the water was easier because the last broth fast I did, I actually had some digestive issues, and which I had never had before. So I thought that was kind of interesting with the broth because I had done about 2 4-day broth fasts before, and then this one I did in January, I just didn't feel well the entire time. So that's why I was kind of curious to try the water as well, and I felt a lot better doing the water than the broth. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, there's different fasts have different benefits, and sometimes we've put people into modified fasts where they do water with some just simple fats, whether it's olive oils and coconut oils, MCT oils. There's all types of different fasts. But I do believe the most healing of all is the water fast. It really is, and I think people are intimidated, from it. But look, the body's innate intelligence knows what to do. Animals fast instinctively. They do. They get sick, they break a limb, anything. They just immediately do not eat and they just drink water. Humans, we need to be taught. But I think Dr. Dempsey said it on the call, right? The Bible talks about when you fast, not if, and it's replete with how fasting, heals the body, in so many different ways, not just physical, but even spiritual. So
I think there's an innate attraction to it too. I mean, because it's amazing how much interest comes up when you talk about fasting.
Yeah.
Meredith mentioned I started in New York. I started a master's program, but I upgraded. I'm in a PhD program now in health psychology, and one of the things we're going over right now is addiction. And of course, I relate it back to the carb addiction cycle and the endorphin cycle of eating and false hunger and all that kind of things. And I put in the references of fasting. I mean, the whole panel of the PhD mentor level and stuff like that just erupts. And sometimes in a weird way, but sometimes in a very good way. The interest level is so there, and these are academics. Normally,
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect to get much rise out of. So I mean, we're even talking now about possibly redirecting the focus of the self-directed dissertation to include something on this, because it's just they just find it fascinating. I think there's an innate resignation there.
Yeah, hey, look, I agree, but look, those watching, we always say, we're training doctors around the country in these modalities, so, supervision is key. Something as simple as electrolytes, how to break the fast, and, these are important things that, we're getting more and more doctors to understand. But if we can get more doctors understanding these ancient healing strategies, boy, I'll tell you what, we can change a paradigm. That's for darn sure. And like you said, Dr. Don, you said, man, you can't even mention the word fasting, in some of the circles.
Fasting is fast is a 4-letter word, and above that, it's an F word in those circles.
Oh, 4-letter F word. You can't use fasting. So we got our fast. You got to come up with another terminology, right? Which you did, Don. That's fantastic. But yeah, no, we're the opposite. We think it's a word that represents health and healing, man, and we're trying to educate the population. 180 degrees opposite of what everyone thinks is where health comes from, man. It's been a message I teach for a long time, right? The world thinks fasting is dangerous or bad or whatever they think, or there's a lot of myths, right? You can't do that. Your body's gonna eat all its muscle, right? It's a myth.
The flip side is you find out what everyone's doing, then you just do the opposite.
That's the 180-degree approach, Don. Absolutely, man. Always do 180 degrees opposite. Somehow you hit it right every time. Well, some takeaways. Don, it's the liver, right?
It's the liver.
Absolutely. What about the fat in the liver, the fat in the pancreas, the visceral fat? A lot of toxic issues are driving a lot of that, right? And, in exercise on an empty stomach, wait as long as you can before. Don't just take all the whey protein right afterwards. It sails up the glucose and insulin. You and I are both believers in that, right? Vary it up. So resistive training, throw that in. I mean, a lot of gems here, Don.
3 meals a day.
Yeah, 3 meals. That's where you start, and then we can cut you down to 2. And, intermittent fasting, but exactly. Take away the snacks. Don, you gave us a lot of gems. Thanks for sharing your story, and Meredith, thanks for sharing yours. But we'll have you back for sure.
I hope so. We got 487 people in our cohort right now going through this, and so hopefully in about 12 weeks we'll have a whole lot more to report.
Yep, absolutely. We'll keep in touch with that. Don, you've shared a lot, so thank you very much. Thanks Meredith.
For having me. Thank you both.
Sign us off, Meredith. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Dr. Clum, your wealth of information. Really appreciated all of those gems, as Dr. Pompa said today, and definitely keep us posted on the results, and we'll have you back soon.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care, and stay tuned. Next week, we will have Dr. Jason Fung, who you mentioned, Dr. Clum, in this episode today. He is an expert on fasting right there.
That's his book.
Yeah.
He's been very generous to me.
Awesome. We are so excited to have him on the show, too.
Yeah, well, we're going to keep hammering these experts at you, man, so you realize we're not just crazy people out there doing crazy things. We know what we're talking about. All right, guys. We'll see ya.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.